Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Oh, Tony, everyone at home who's just listening and not watching live is wondering, why does Tony sound so angry about the fact that this is a Buckeye Weekly Podcast? And the answer is, you found out about 13 seconds before we started that this was a Buckeye Weekly Podcast and not a morning show. So you have to run the show and not me tonight. So
no sidecar.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. So I won't even attempt to name all of the players that we talked to tonight. I don't know what the final number turned out to be.
Got them all.
Got them all. So I had 3 over at table 3.
So we didn't get Josh Simmons?
So 10. So still a record output for a non-media day event here at Ohio State. But a lot of good stuff. It's the first time we've got to talk to a lot of these players since the Notre Dame game. You know, we talked to some last week, talked to Chip Trayanum today for the first time since the Notre Dame game. That dude is cool, calm, like matter of fact, very excited about scoring the winning touchdown against Notre Dame. But then he said, talking to Tony Alford on the Monday after the game, saying, that's great and all, but I didn't come here to just have one moment at Ohio State.
Yeah, when we're talking about setting the bar high, he came to Ohio State to play linebacker, and now here he is playing running back, which is what he kind of, I think, originally wanted to do at Ohio State coming out of high school. Wasn't offered that opportunity coming out of high school to play running back at Ohio State, so went to Arizona State, then came back to Ohio State to play linebacker, and then ends up at running back. He does the reverse steel chambers, and he ends up scoring this like iconic touchdown in Ohio State history. And we'll see where this season ends. And people remember the Bobby Olive touchdown against Iowa, even though that was in a 3-4 loss season. Not as many people remember that as remember the Holy Buckeye play, for example. But this is going to be a play that people are talking about 35 years from now, and that's pretty. I think the challenge for him is, okay, you have done this. Now you have to put all that aside because now you got to play another game this week.
Yeah, it's like winning the MVP and Rookie of the Year in the same year. And now it's like now do something better than that.
Let's see you win the Rookie of the Year award again.
Exactly, and you're not going to. But with him having that role that he has now as the not necessarily the short yardage back, but just the number 2 back at this point, and the way he is, his leadership aspect as well. I thought it was. I don't know if you saw this part. You might have been typing, but so earlier Marvin Harrison said like Chip is one of the best leaders on the team, and so somebody asked Chip about that, and he got he smiled like,
really?
Marvin said that about me, and so that was pretty cool too.
Yeah, and he was someone. Wasn't he someone who we were told like if they had a fourth captain, like he might have been in line to be that fourth captain, which to be a transfer guy and I guess you have the advantage of knowing people from both sides of the ball pretty well from various meeting rooms, but
he crosses both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, exactly. Chip Trayanum, a politician for our times. He to come in and just immediately be that impressive, and that he talked about the fact you have to come in and you are among everyone here was an alpha dog in high school. So in order to be, you either rise or you fall. You either become, you rise to become the alpha dog among the alpha dogs, or you fall and you sort of, he didn't say sink into quicksand, but I think that's kind of the general, you're no one is staying static. You're either improving or you're not. And he has, taken that challenge, embraced that challenge, and certainly had a bigger role on the field this year than I was expecting 3 months ago. And, that's a testament to all the work he has put in to this point.
Yeah, for sure. This is also the first time we got to talk to anybody and all of these guys about Notre Dame only having 10 men on the field for the last 2 plays. He didn't notice that necessarily because he was focused on just getting straight ahead.
He said just something looked weird. Something looked weird, but he didn't know until he was in the locker room and on his phone, and it was kind of like, oh.
Yeah, so we talked to Josh Fryar about that, and he's like, obviously that was not my side of the field, so I didn't know it. And he didn't really truly believe it until he saw it on the plane, because in the locker room, his teammates, Josh Simmons and Donovan Jackson, told everybody they only had 10 guys on the line. I guess he didn't believe them.
I didn't believe them. I had the same reaction to Chip Trayanum because if you look at the picture for the Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning episode that's already up on the because we already recorded that, Tony. Sorry, I already recorded that. You weren't there.
Deep fake.
You were there in spirit. But the picture on the YouTube channel for the Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning episode that just went up a couple hours ago is that angle of that play. And it's, you look, and I was looking at it and I'm like, it just looks weird. It's like they're in a weird alignment or something, because you can see the gap, you can see the guard clearly, you can see the tackle clearly, you can see the gap between the guard and the tackle clearly. And it's like, it just doesn't look right. It didn't occur to me, like, well, of course, Notre Dame has put 10 men out of the field. That did not occur to me, and it didn't occur to Chip Trayanum. But yeah, that was the first time I heard, yeah, they only had 10 guys in the field. I thought, that can't be right.
No, and the difficulty for Josh Simmons, and unfortunately we didn't get to talk to him because this would have been interesting to talk about, is what do you do when the man that you're supposed to block is not there? And it would be like taking a written test and the question for number 5 just says number 5. It's like, well, what's the question? How am I supposed to answer this? And fortunately for them, they got everything correct on that one. But talking to Josh Fryar and saying, he didn't really believe his teammates, and I was like, so you don't think they can count? Like, you don't? He's like, no, I think Notre Dame's an outstanding institution. Of course they can count. I'm like, no, your teammates. You didn't think they could count to 11. Oh, no. Donnie and Josh, they can count. So I just want to reassure everybody that Ohio State's offensive linemen can count. It's just sometimes the right tackle doesn't believe them when they do.
I mean, that was one of those difficult to believe things. Like in that moment, coming off of a timeout, 2 plays in a row, you have 10 on the field. I mean, we don't need to belabor this for Notre Dame fans. But.
No, I will tweet out some video of Josh Fryar that he said something that made everybody laugh, and it was about the 10 men. So.
Yeah, okay.
I don't remember what it was. I just remember everybody laughed.
Another dynamite drop-in.
It's called a tease, Tom.
Chip Trayanum talked about the fact that, he watched that play a lot. Mm-hmm. Watched the team running on the field more, because he's down on the field and he's looking down the line of scrimmage to find the official to see if he's been called in or not. So, he's gone back and watched the team running on the field and celebrating that moment. Said it happened so fast but so slow. He felt like he was falling slowly, and like as he's falling, he's telling himself to keep his knees up, because it looks, there's a way he falls knees first, and he's down before the ball gets to the goal line.
The ab control to keep your knees off the ground like that.
And then he said, the key on a play like that, when you've got the guys coming unblocked off the backside. He said the key is you got to stay tight to the line, get a good mesh point, don't get too wide. If you stay tight to the line, the defender can only get one arm on you, and if you're going full speed, one arm isn't going to stop you. So it didn't.
Mm-mm. No, and then they only needed to get. We're right on the line right here. This is all they needed to get. Who else did you have over at that table?
I had Steel Chambers.
Okay.
May I tell you, Steel Chambers was hustled out of there, and I was none too pleased. He said that he had questions for us, and then we didn't get to find out what the questions were. So I feel a little bit cheated. He talked about the fact that I think the Steel Chambers line of the night was, how well equipped are you to sort of adapt to what's happening? And he said, we're well equipped. Got Jim Knowles up there in the Owl's Nest cooking things up. It's like, that is a very Steel Chambers way to say that. He said about the Notre Dame game, the linebackers were not great in that game. He and Tommy Eichenberg, they didn't grade out by whatever PFF metric you want to use, but he said, we played pretty bad, have to take responsibility, we have to, their eyes were everywhere. They have to be more focused, know where their keys are. They've got to be able to make adjustments on the field. And he didn't feel like they did a great job of that against Notre Dame.
And Jim Knowles said the same thing. The tight end motion ended up creating extra gaps and causing the linebackers, if you've got 3 gaps and only 2 linebackers, there are going to be some issues there. So Jim Knowles said he needs to adjust better to that. And obviously that would help the linebackers. So I talked to Josh Fryar. Yeah, the short yardage stuff, we talked about it, and he's like, it's mainly just technique and things like that, stuff that is fixable. Like they always tell us, everything is fixable. So it's better than saying, well, we can't do anything about it because we're just not good enough. And so, it's going to get better because it can't stay this bad. So that's one thing. Also talked with Denzel Burke. This will be the best group of receivers in passing game that they see. He's looking forward to that. As he said, it'll present some more opportunities for him because last week 2 weeks ago against Notre Dame, he got pretty bored and had maybe like 1 target early in the first quarter and then maybe 1 later on in the game. And really looking forward to just being busier on the day, and also talk about the difficulty in handling Talia Tagovailoa's ability to extend the play. So you just got to stick with your man, and as long as you're covering your guy, it doesn't matter how long he's running around back there.
Jordan Hancock said almost the same thing verbatim, and talked about Maryland's going to test them vertically with the play action pass. Tagovailoa extending plays with his legs, and I think he said, if you cover for 4 seconds, if you cover for 10 seconds. If they're covering for 10 seconds, that's a problem. But if they have to, they've got to cover for however long they've got to cover. He talked about the fact that Western Kentucky ran a lot of RPO, but Maryland is going to be the team that runs the most RPO of anyone they've seen so far this year. I thought it was interesting. A couple people were asked about Davis Igbenogsen's physical play. Yeah. He was one of those guys, and talked about how Davis Igbenogsen, just little skinny dude, going out and laying the wood on much bigger guys. He said, then he said it's everyone else feels the pressure. He goes, no, not pressure, but feels motivated to. It feels like there's a lot of momentum to go out and make that kind of play themselves. The bigger guys, like, okay, if the little dude's going out there and hitting the big guys got no excuse. Last thing I thought was interesting for Jordan Hancock, he said he's feeling he feels like he's very versatile right now. Everyone knows every position. There's a lot more checks on the defense this year, but he said, he can play inside corner. He's comfortable playing, the nickel spot that he's in for the most part right now, but he's comfortable playing outside corner. He's comfortable playing that deep field safety position as well. So, that's a level of versatility that, if you have an injury, that's going to be big. But it also just, you don't have to play deep field safety for the whole game. You might be you might be disguising a coverage by dropping, and then, Josh Proctor's coming down and crashing. So that just gives them a lot more kind of opportunities and options in the back end.
Well, and Jim Knowles said they need to change the picture for Talia Tagovailoa. What you show pre-snap is not what you show post-snap, and things like that. And the versatility that you have allows you to do different things. Denzel Burke was also asked about Davis Igbenogsen's physicality, and he said he's never played with a corner as physical as Igbenogsen. And he said that, this is a guy that he's the only quarterback he knows that actively seeks out the run pile. Like, he will just run to it. It reminded me, like, you see those videos of the dog that runs to the pile of leaves and jumps into it. That's basically, he's just jumping into a pile of leaves looking to hit somebody.
If you've jumped into a pile of leaves and you've jumped into a pile of bodies on the football field, I don't think those feel exactly the same. But
I will tell you, one time I jumped into a pile of leaves, and I had forgotten earlier in the day I had put an apple bushel in that pile because I was trying to trick somebody to jumping on that pile of leaves. That was like 3 weeks ago. It's an embarrassing moment, but
Mayberry?
No, but close.
This is one of these times when I'm not sure if I would trust you to count to 10. But, we don't need to belabor that. Josh Proctor, speaking of the deep field safety, Josh Proctor talked about the fact that they're just right now, one of the keys for the defense is they're watching more film, which is allowing them to anticipate rather than react. And that's, when you're making these bang bang plays, and you see the ball skims 2 inches over a safety's hands or a corner's hands or whatever, you just miss a tackle or you just make that shoestring tackle. That matter of inches is a matter of a quarter of a second or something like that. So if you're able to anticipate and not just be reacting to what's happening, but getting there, it's the Wayne Gretzky thing where, why was Wayne Gretzky the best player? He wasn't the fastest. He wasn't the strongest. It was because he knew he was going to go where the puck was going to go next. Well, if you can anticipate where's the ball going to go next, or where's this guy going to go next, you can beat him to that spot, and that's how you make plays.
And that's the comparison that Jim Knowles has used for Tommy Eichenberg last year. He would go where the ball was going, and that's why he was so much better than everybody else on the defense. But now you're closer to more 11 Tommy Eichenbergs, which is what he's been shooting for. Talked with Tyleik Williams. He was asked about his dropped interception. I said, hey, have you thought about getting on the Monarch machine? He's like, I need to. Now, I do think if he were to do it, he would have to do it with his hands taped up like they are in a game.
Yeah.
It's got to be like game-like situation. Just whatever you do, probably don't have it near your face. Like, have it, down here.
Maybe have your helmet on while you're using it.
Well, a game-like situation for sure. But Jim Knowles talked yesterday about how he's playing a bunch, but he's still behind in terms of reps because he didn't have practice. And I asked Tyleik if it's impacted him. He's like, no. I was like, is it nice not having as many reps? Maybe. I don't know. Like in terms of practice, it's always nice not having as much practice. Ask Orlando Pace in the NFL when he would always hold out for the entire preseason or whatever. But he's a guy that has really stepped up his game playing more than ever, playing more than anybody else on the inside, and continues to produce.
Yeah, and Mike Hall talked about him and just the fact that, he really set that tone with that tackle for loss right off the bat at Notre Dame. And that was sort of, I think whenever I hear people talk about something like that, I think back to, like the 2002 season and, Matt Wilhelm going in and tackling Willis McGahee for a big loss right on that first drive and like getting up and doing the diamond cutter and like really doing the like set the tone thing. Same thing with the first play of the 2002 season. Was it Bobby Carpenter and AJ Hawk flying down on kick coverage and making the tackle, and it was just kind of like, they got 12-yard line or something on the kick return. And it was just kind of like, oh, it's going to be that kind of day. Okay.
How about this one, Tom? 1997, Andy Katzenmoyer, Tavian Banks tackled him like 2 or 3 of the first couple times he had the ball, and he was coming in averaging 200 yards rushing per game, and Katzenmoyer shut him down.
That's not even the most famous time he did that to a quarterback in 1997.
Well, Tavian Banks, the running back.
Oh, Tavian Banks, the running back. Yeah. Sorry, I was thinking of Brad Banks.
Yes.
Sorry, I was thinking of Brad Banks, not Tavian Banks. Yeah, the Corby Jones hit, of course, at Missouri, the other one that I was thinking about. But yeah, that's it feels like that's one of those narratives that kind of gets made retroactively, where you come in and you have a big hit at the beginning, and then no one remembers if it doesn't portend a big day defensively.
When did Zach Dumas's hit happen against Auburn? That was in the first or second quarter.
It was in the first half. Yeah, in the Hall of Fame Bowl in 1989.
What happened after that?
I don't know. It was a John Cooper team in a bowl game against the SEC, so I assume it went well.
Sure, it was fine.
Yeah. Do we have questions we want to run through?
Yes. Condes 13. Igbinosun is so good, underrated, in my opinion.
I wonder if saying Davison Igbinosun is so good and underrated, I wonder how people would feel about him if this secondary is giving up big plays, because he does get penalized.
Yeah.
And so if he's one of these guys if he's one of the guys giving up big plays, then obviously you're not going to be super happy with him.
Right.
But even if it's other people, I think he might get lumped into that. So I agree. And they don't want him to change anything he's doing, because sure, there might be a 15-yard penalty here and something there, but everything else he's doing, Tom, I think what you do is you bake in 2 or 3 pass interferences and 1 or 2 targetings.
Well, this is one of these times when I'm sure when this happens, when it's your team on offense, it's absolutely maddening. But they can't call them all defense is, it works, and they cannot, in fact, call them all. I think he's someone who you knew what you were bringing in. This is not the first time he has played like this at the college level. And this is something Ohio State really hasn't had at the corner position that much in recent years. Josh Proctor talked about the fact that they've got, Jeff Okudah and Damon Arnett in 2019. Those guys were corners that were like lockdown, take no crap kind of corners. And they've got this. And he said it's really kind of the first time they've had that since 2019. Kind of. Yeah, well, with Jordan Fuller for this year's team, and I'm like, I don't know if that's something I would want to put on myself. But that it is a, playing corner is a little bit of an attitude position where, you have to have the technique. It's not just, you can't just be swagger. Otherwise, Miami would be a far more successful football team this century. But having that attitude and having that, this guy's not going to beat me, and then, actually following through and having the technique to not let that guy beat you. That's something that is, I think that's pervasive across the defense as well, not just that one guy.
Yeah, and if you lose one time, you just say it didn't happen and you move on. Kevin?
Yeah, sorry, I was working on an offer. A recruiting offer. John Alexander, is the defensive line and linebackers, are they pretty healthy for this game?
Defensive line and linebackers, are they pretty healthy for this game? Yeah, I think.
We talked to both linebackers, and I saw CJ Hicks standing there while we were talking to Steele Chambers, so he's fine.
You talked to Tommy Eichenberg?
I did not. Oh, you know what? I didn't talk to Tommy Eichenberg.
I saw him running in no shoes on, so seemed fine. He was all dressed and all taped up, and so he's fine. Defensive line, I don't know that anybody is banged up in any way.
I didn't notice. We a lot of times we'll come in here on a Wednesday and we'll have a sense that, hey, make sure you're looking for fill in the blank, might be a little banged up. And then we are kind of taking a look at, taped up. Is he, no contact jersey? Is he not wearing pads? Whatever. There wasn't anyone that I came in this week with the, hey, make sure you look at this guy. And I didn't notice. I wasn't looking for JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer. I don't have any indication that there's a concern on the front seven.
We talked to Marvin, who's just coming out now to hit the Monarch machine with Reece Stocksdale. But he was the only guy that said, he did say it, and he said his sprained ankle this year is probably worse than last year's, but he knows how to play with it, and he's fine, and don't worry about it. Don't.
And he played all of last year with it, basically. When he did sprain it was like the Arkansas State game. So second and third game last year, he played with that banged up all year last year, so this is really nothing new for him.
Yeah, he said as he sat down, he was asked immediately, and he was like, how's that ankle? And he said, good enough.
Yeah, good enough.
Good enough.
That's what I've people ask me, how good is Marvin Harrison? I'm like, good enough.
What's it like working with Tony? Next question.
Jordan Kapler. What's funny is I think Notre Dame fans will be talking about Chip's touchdown longer than Ohio State fans.
That's a great point. Jordan Kapler is saying that Notre Dame fans may be talking about Chip Trayanum's touchdown longer than Ohio State's fans. That's going to be a play that will live in infamy at Notre Dame, especially if they end up missing. They go 11-1 and miss the playoffs. That's going to be one that is going to sting.
Yeah, for sure. And that's going to sting regardless because they haven't beaten Ohio State in 85 years or whatever it is. And this was the year when the stars were aligned. They had them at home. Ohio State new quarterback, shaky offensive line. They've got a whole veteran defense. This was like the universe is aligning for Notre Dame to finally beat Ohio State. It's a lot like Ole Miss and Alabama. Like Ole Miss is not going to have a better shot at Alabama than they had this year. And then they just kind of no-showed it. Notre Dame, probably even more frustrating because it was like, Ohio, it's got to be a little bit like the Ohio State Peach Bowl loss where you had it, it was right there, you lost it by one kick, and then you look at the national championship game and it's like, oh boy, that would not have been a challenge in that national championship game.
But those misses were your own misses.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, is this more like Desmond Howard's punt return against? Is it something like that?
Did Ohio State have 10 guys on the field for Desmond Howard's? I mean, I would argue that Notre Dame having 10 guys on the field made it Notre Dame's miss.
Well, yeah, but in terms of just that pain of somebody else doing that to you, or obviously the Charles Woodson. I mean, those are the two that I keep thinking back for Ohio State in terms of the one play that beat you, even though those necessarily weren't.
If I was going to say, if Charles, the Desmond Howard return, they would.
In terms of the revisionist history that we talked about earlier, like they grow roots and legs and become something different than they were at the time. But that's going to be. I'm with you. It's going to last at both places for a very long time, but they're going to look very different to whomever you ask.
Yeah. Well, at Ohio State, it's a heroic play, and at Notre Dame, we can't count to 11.
Although I think it was Josh Fryar, maybe it was Chip Trayanum said, we would have gotten it regardless. So
Chip said that.
So just rest assured. There's your answer.
Drowsy Dragon, has Ryan Day neutered Knowles, or is Knowles no longer willing to be as aggressive on his own?
Yeah.
I think Jim. I think Jim Knowles is doing exactly what Jim Knowles needs to do, and I don't think he's been neutered. He's not. He's.
I think it's. Go ahead, Tom.
No, he's not doing exactly what he's always done, but he hasn't, I don't think, ever run exactly the same defense. I think he's adjusted to the realities of his current situation. And his current situation is you have corners that are, you don't need to cover for your corners. Your corners can cover for themselves. You don't need to take crazy chances because your front four is getting pressure. Even if they're not getting sacks, they're getting pressure. Mike Hall talked about the difference between, he said stats don't show it, but you turn on the tape and you see how you're impacting things. And they are impacting things in the passing game. They are really, really making a significant negative impact on the opposing quarterback. His ability to see down the field, his ability to set his feet, his ability to step into throws, his ability to throw on platform, and all those things. And so you don't have to take risks. You can just play it safe. You don't have to, just because Jim Knowles is not going all in with like a pair of threes doesn't mean that he's been neutered. It means he's now playing smarter poker because he's got a bet, he's getting consistently better hands. So he doesn't have to push all in with, 7-2 offsuit.
Yeah. I wrote about it what is today? Wednesday morning about Jim Knowles and the less aggressive Jim Knowles by choice, because and I called it the relaxed fit Jim Knowles, which I think
elastic waistband Jim Knowles.
Just pajama pants Jim Knowles.
Hey. Shots waist up, right? Okay, good. Yeah, you can't tell.
But these are things, as he examined what went wrong last year, and you find some things that went wrong, and you correct those. Now, by correcting those, you're also being less aggressive elsewhere. But as long as that elsewhere is still being stopped, then I think you're okay. And they're not giving up the big plays that they did last year. I think they're going to be tested in that regard. This week, I asked Denzel Burke, hey, do you know how long the longest touchdown you guys have given up this year? He's like, I don't know, 30? Like 2. He's like, oh, that's pretty good.
That is in fact pretty good. Yeah, I don't think right now, I don't think Ohio State fans should have any qualms about Jim Knowles. And, Tony, it's a long season. Yeah. Don't worry. Things can always fall apart. But right now, a month into the season, I think you've got to grade the defense as, at least an A.
Yeah.
If you want to not give them an A+ because they've given up some long extended drives, that's fine. But I don't think you can really honestly grade them as less than an A.
Yeah, and I think if things go well and things go poorly, then they're going to start blitzing more, and then you'll get what you want. But
and he has more blitzes. We were told earlier in the week, don't worry, he has more blitzes saved up for later in the season.
Plus the Owl's Nest. Kevin, do you have something?
Who?
John Alexander. This may sound like a silly question, but does Jim Knowles have carte blanche regarding the defense?
Does Jim Knowles have carte blanche regarding the defense? You have to be. Here's the thing that assistant coaches always say: you are part of a staff. You have to be unselfish, and you have to have no ego. Mm-hmm. Now, a coordinator should be able to have all of those things. Like he should have some ego. But I think it's been impressive the way Jim Knowles has backed off of his ego and not gone all out in terms of the aggression. But no, I don't think I don't think he has carte blanche.
Well, how are we defining this? I don't think Ryan Day's on the headset saying, no, don't run that coverage. I don't think it's getting micromanaged like that, but I think there were, and Day talked about this. You can hear this exact quote on today's Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning podcast. Day talked about this earlier in the week, where he talked about the fact that they looked at this. They sat down and had conversations earlier in the year, and I think it was sort of a high level conversation about hey, here's what worked, here's what didn't. What do we need to change to make that better? So this was not Jim Knowles being able to, like, if he wants to run a 11, it's a safety driven defense and we're going to have 11 safeties on the field. Like, he doesn't, I don't think he has carte blanche to do that. But I think once you got through the the initial setup and sort of overall umbrella of the season, I don't think Ryan Day's in there necessarily grinding defensive tape and going, got to do this differently next week.
No, I think he has carte blanche within the snow globe, but not on the end table as a whole.
Correct. It's like Stephen King's The Dome, but a defense.
And better.
Got 3 more quickies, unless we get a super chat thrown in there. First one, Isaiah Brockman, Notre Dame versus Michigan, neutral field. Who y'all got?
Michigan.
No, I'm not saying. I'm just repeating the question. Notre Dame versus Michigan, neutral field. Does Notre Dame score more against Michigan than they do against Ohio State? Was that 17-14?
Yeah,
I think they're going to struggle to get to 14, but a broken play here or there.
Yeah, I'm more right now. I think Michigan gets into the 20s, and I think there's plenty of worlds where Ohio State gets into the 20s. So this is not Michigan is clearly a better defense or offense than Ohio State. But I don't know that Notre Dame. I struggle with this just in that I think Michigan's offense. I learned more about Michigan's offense last week against Nebraska because Nebraska has a pretty decent defense. I don't think we know anything about Michigan's defense because everyone they've been played has just been a steaming pile of garbage on offense. And I think the Notre Dame Michigan game might end up with both teams having higher scores than the Ohio State Notre Dame game did. I would take Michigan there. I don't think Michigan beats them 38-17 or anything like that, but 28-21 or something.
Or what about, instead of a neutral site game, at night in Notre Dame?
There's that. Yeah, I mean that's a
that's a dangerous place to play.
That is
a situation that you just have to be careful with.
That is a very difficult environment.
not a question, but a follow-up to that. Tom's blue shirt is showing with that quick yelled response from Last One Butterfly.
Wait till I tell you what color shirt Kevin's wearing behind the camera.
UCLA blue.
Yeah, it's
UCLA blue.
Just say it's Justin Fry blue from the sidelines.
It's Kingsford blue.
Yes.
There you go. Murphy Serafino, don't you think that the way Notre Dame came back and won against Duke heals some of those wounds for this season? Feel they can go on a run now?
So did Notre Dame's comeback win over Duke heal some of the wounds from the week before? I mean, probably some, and they absolutely, to his point, can go on a run, but that doesn't unring the bell. Like, Ohio State won a bunch of games after Baker Mayfield planted a flag in Ohio Stadium, and guess what? People still talk about Baker Mayfield planting a flag in Ohio Stadium. This is not. If Ohio State had beaten Georgia last year, that everyone forgets the Michigan game before that. Beating Duke is it was a solid win. We'll see where Notre Dame ends up. If Notre Dame ends up 11-1 and gets in the college football playoff and maybe wins a game, that one probably gets largely forgotten. But that's still, just because of the series history between the two teams, I think that one's going to sting just a little bit extra. And because of the way it ended, I think it's going to sting a little bit extra.
It will be interesting to see what they're going to need help at 11-1. They would need, maybe a typical year, they would be fine.
Yes.
But in a strange year, they would need help, and not having that conference championship. But you would have wins over USC. I don't know that a win over Clemson is anything major this year. Anything more than Duke. I mean, Duke.
Yeah,
beat Clemson,
a quality win on the road over Duke, which is a thing that you're normally talking about with Andy Katz. But that's a thing this year, and we'll see how well Duke holds up with Riley. What's his name? Leonard with his. I was thinking
Skinner.
Riley Skinner, and I was like, nope, wrong school in wrong decade, wrong school in North Carolina.
Same state, yes.
Yes.
Kevin.
Mika Hanna, we need to spread the ball around more, especially when we have guys like Julian Fleming and Xavier Johnson to take some heat off of Marvin.
I would like to see Julian Fleming targeted more. I think you go back to, I would like to see Jamison Williams targeted more. And you get a lot of those vibes. And I think that there are things that he can do. It's the opposite of when Jim Tressel, we would say, people would say, why don't you throw to the tight end? And it's like, well, I'm throwing to the tight end. I'm not throwing to Santonio. I'm not throwing to Ted Ginn. It's like, why don't you throw it to Julian? Like, well, if I'm throwing it to Julian, I'm not throwing it to Cade Stover.
Yeah, well, and, this is Marvin Harrison. Day talked about this on Monday as well, that they're bracketing Marvin Harrison. Opposings are bracketing Marvin Harrison more frequently this year than in previous years. And that's one of the reasons why you've seen a huge year so far for Emeka Egbuka. I think there is going to be a time. There were times when in previous games where it felt like opponents were kind of almost doubling both of those guys, and that's when you've got to be looking for Julian Fleming, because he's there. He is open. He's not always open, but he's open a decent amount. I think Kyle McCord is also right now, as a young quarterback, trying not to make a mistake, trying to, he's being a little more cautious. He's going through his progressions, and it's like, first guy who's open, I'm going there. And that may be, Ross Fulton has talked about this on a couple of shows recently. He's maybe coming off of Marvin Harrison a little too early at times, where Marvin's running deeper routes. So sometimes the break is further downfield, so you got to stay with him a little longer. It feels like he's maybe and he has not made the big mistake. Came close against Notre Dame, but has not made the big mistake. And that's, with a young quarterback so far this season, that has been enough.
Well, and the other thing is, if you want to target Julian Fleming more, he has to be hurt earlier in the progression.
Yes.
Because if he's 3 or 4 in the progression, and you're dealing with Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka as the first two, chances are one of those guys is getting open. So, or you're going to believe you can hit a window. So it was something that Kevin Wilson said a year or so ago, like being the tight ends coach and the offensive coordinator. We have the tight ends now that we could start to put them higher up in the process. And, if you want to get Julian Fleming the ball, then you kind of need to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Is that it? Okay. Tom, do you have anything else before we get out of here?
No, I think we're good shape. Make sure you're checking out Buckeyes tomorrow morning. Make sure you're checking out all of our podcasts. You can find them on wherever you're finding this podcast.
And this podcast is the Buckeye Weekly Podcast.
Big if true.
Which was a surprise to me until I got here to do the show.
Everybody loves surprises.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I've done this before. This is my 7th podcast that I've ever been on. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. As always, thank you for jumping on live, staying with the stream the entire time. I know I apologize for Kevin. Thank you, Kevin. I am number 1. Anyway, that is going to do it. We want to thank you all for joining us as always, and we'll talk to you guys later.